So I want to talk a little bit more about a subject related to my new book, Money Your Friend, and a subject that we hear talked about all the time on YouTube when it comes to the law of assumption and a lot, various law of attraction ideas. But it involves talking about our imagination and how that term, your imagination creates reality. How we usually look at that, and how perhaps we can get a little bit more out of the box in terms of how we look at that saying, and what Neville meant when he said that. But before I forget, if you don't have the book already, Money Your Friend, I'll put the link below, the international link. So anywhere in the world you are, you should be able to download a copy if you do it soon for around $1. And if you read the book and like it, please rate and review it on Amazon. I'll put a link below to that as well. People don't leave ratings and reviews like they used to. Everybody's tired of leaving reviews because everybody asks. And I know it can be a drag when people ask to, review something or whatever. But if you like the book, I would appreciate it if you left a review or simply a rating, because that makes it so that Amazon recommends the book to more people and more people can find out about the book, and more importantly, find out about the advice in the book, which is basically treating your money in a kinder, more gentle way, which I personally have found to be rather transformative in regards to how I look at money and deal with money in my own life, and how I feel better about the financial situations I find myself in, whatever they may be, good or bad. I'm able to deal with them more cleanly, more smoothly, with less stress by treating my money in a kinder way. And at this point, I've helped a lot of other people do the same type of thing, change their approach towards money so it's less antagonistic and kinder. So it's unique information that will help most people who are into these law of assumption, law of attraction, manifesting type of ideas. And today, like I said, I just want to talk briefly about how in the box we tend to be when we hear things like your imagination creates reality, because obviously on YouTube, Neville's very popular now in this crazy small niche, this law of assumption niche. Yet people look at their imagination and they just hear these catchphrases, these phrases that Neville said, and make them these kind of popular catchphrases. And yet they look at their imagination and work with the information that Neville provides in my opinion, a very fixed way. See, your imagination, you hear people say, for instance, I want to manifest something. I have to manifest, for instance, money, right? Or I have to manifest something. Or what manifestations have you had? Stuff like that. You hear that kind of talk all the time. And really, that's not understanding these ideas well, in my opinion. Because the truth of the matter, the way Neville meant it, in my opinion, and again, this is just my opinion, is you're always manifesting. Your consciousness, your life is a manifestation, right? So you can intentionally try to manifest very specific external things. An SP, or a certain job, or a certain living situation, or a certain amount of money, and be very specific. And do SATs, do all these different exercises that Neville said you could do to manifest that very specific thing, and then be like, I manifested this very specific thing. That's a way of interpreting this information, obviously. But if that's the only way you look at it, good luck. Because most of you aren't going to be able to do it consistently. Just looking at it that way. You're not going to be able to. Some of you maybe. Most people not. What you're really trying to do, in my opinion, with your imagination is work with it more constructively, more lovingly. To imagine the best for yourself and others, right? I think that's more along the lines of what Neville often talked about. And by doing that, by imagining more lovingly, your life externally does improve. And your life externally often seems to improve dramatically over time. Because when it comes to imagining, and this definitely relates to money as I get into in depth in Money Your Friend, when it comes to imagining, we tend to imagine unlovingly. We imagine very negatively a lot of the time when it comes to money or relationships or health. And some of us imagine pretty well for some of those subjects, but we have trouble with others. A lot of us just imagine negatively about all those things most of the time. In Neville's advice, and advice like it, like the advice of Emile Coué, who influenced Neville a lot and was similar to Neville in that he was a huge proponent of utilizing your imagination. Their advice is about figuring out and convincing yourself that I can imagine more positively. And that by imagining more positively and constructively, instead of negatively and destructively, my life will improve. Because you're always imagining, for good or bad. You can't help but be imagining. And we often hear, especially when it comes to something like money, like God is supply. God is my supply. Now for Neville, what that meant is that your imagination is your supply. I quote Neville in the book. I think it's in Sound Investments. He's talking about Jimmy Fuller, talking about how he realized his time now, his thinking, his imagination right now was an investment. Right now is an investment. And we're constantly investing in the now. What are we thinking about? What are we imagining? And if we can figure out, and Neville gives all these different ways of doing this, as do all these other great law of attraction teachers, figure out ways to imagine and think more constructively, more positively. Genuinely so. We can't fool ourselves. It's impossible to fool your subconscious in this way. If we genuinely expect better things, think better things, imagine better things, our life externally improves. That's big boy, big girl manifestation talk. It's not like, I manifested this certain thing once or whatever. It's like, it's your whole life. It's what you're thinking every day, all the time. And it's very humbling because you realize that you think a lot of shit. So a lot of this work, here, I'll just talk about imagining, but it's really like imagining covers basically everything on a conscious level. So you say, well, I want to imagine more positively. I don't even know how to do that. Well, watch your reactions to things. Imagining is often how you're just reacting to things. You'll realize that you'll react to events in your life more negatively than you might expect, or that more than you want. That's the advantage of doing something like a mental diet like Neville advocated, or particularly, in my opinion, like the way Emmett Fox advocated, like a 7-day mental diet. I'll put a link above to a big playlist we did about the 7-day mental diet of Emmett Fox. If you do a 7-day mental diet, you will start to realize for sure how negatively you react to things. Imaginatively, you are reacting much more negatively than you would like a lot of the time. You go on a 7-day mental diet, you will see that clearly. So, people say work with your imagination. It's not just like, all right, I'm going to imagine a certain thing and then I'm going to manifest that certain thing in my life. No, it's like, how do I react to things? How can I change my reactions? Your imaginative work can just be changing your reactions to things, so you're not as negatively reactive. And again, there's so many different ways to do that. We go over a bunch of them on this channel. So that, in my opinion, is a more holistic and mature approach to this manifesting material that Neville talked about, that like the law of assumption is getting at. And also that someone like Emile Coué was constantly getting at. And you got to remember, like, Coué really made this clear too. You know, like he said, your subconscious or your unconscious are basically the same thing for practical purposes, right? And he says your subconscious or unconscious is just your imagination. Just your imagination. So in other words, your subconscious is your imagination. Your imagination is God, right? So your subconscious is your supply. That's what you're externalizing into your world, generally speaking. Your subconscious is your supply. What your your consciousness, including what's being projected, is that subconscious sum of what's there. You can't hide from it. So your subconscious is your supply, or your imagination is your supply. Coué would say those are basically the same thing. And Neville would say, well, you know, your imagination is God. So in other words, God is your supply. Same thing. God is your supply. Your imagination is your supply. Your subconscious is your supply. Same thing. Your supply of what's within showing without. There's so much depth to these teachings. That's why I love them. I love trying to apply them in my own life. And I love talking to people about them because they're so interesting. And I just don't want you to get swept away by the very superficial horseshit we see all the time on social media that tries to oversimplify, because it's great to simplify these ideas. That's what I try to do. But oversimplification to the point where it makes it so diluted that it's not even going to help you. It's like, oh, how to manifest something quickly. That kind of advice is not deep enough. It's so diluted, it's not going to sustainably help you in your life. Neville's advice, Coué's advice, all these great teachers' advice is meant to sustainably help you for the rest of your life and to build on that supply that you naturally have more and more, your imaginative supply, your godly supply, your subconscious supply. So I hope that was clear. If you haven't read Money Your Friend, I suggest you read it. You can pick up a copy by clicking the link below. And if you have time, you can leave a rating or review on Amazon. That link is below as well. If you have any questions for me, I can be reached at radicalcounselor.com.